Welcome to the Museo Cardinal and welcome to the first Jaime Cardinal Sin lecture series. The title of our talk for today is The Miracle of Asia, Revisiting EDSA Uno. This is in connection with the celebration of the anniversary of EDSA Uno, which will be celebrated on February 25. And this talk, this lecture, will tackle more about Jaime Cardinal Sin, and I will narrate to you the stories of martial law, the stories of EDSA Uno, which were not narrated by the mainstream media, because the lens that I am going to use to see EDSA Uno, or looking at history, is the lens of the church. We will be using and studying the events that transpired through the perspective of the church, from the church's history's perspective, or church history's perspective rather. No? So, okay. We usually think of EDSA Uno and martial law and connect it with the military power. And we are very familiar with the figures of Juan Ponce Enrile, the defense minister during that time, Fidel Ramos, General Fidel Ramos, and Gringo Honasan. But let us look at it, at the truth that it was never possible without the intervention and involvement of the institutions of faith. And among the institutions of faith, for me, the most influential was coming from the Roman Catholic Church. And the Roman Catholic Church was best represented by our very own Jaime Cardinal Sin. And until now, wala pa ring prelate, church prelate, na makakatumbas sa impluensya at karisma ng ating minamahal na Jaime Cardinal Sin. Who is Jaime Cardinal Sin? Remember, we have this framework when we approach history, and I always apply the framework which I learned from my history professor, the Sitz im Leben. There are three things. Sitz im Leben der Persona, Sitz im Leben der Kirche, and Sitz im Leben der Texte. When you study philosophy, I know Father Val would always mention the school of life, the school of thought rather, and the context as Aprentado would murmur, the context. Now, let us study first the person. Who is Jaime Cardinal Sin? Jaime Cardinal Sin was born on August 31, 1928 in this very house. He grew up here in New Washington. His father was a Chinese businessman. Because of the economic crisis in China, he has to migrate to the Philippines. He considered the Philippines as a greener pasture. But instead of settling in Calibo, which is more populated, more crowded, he opted to settle here in New Washington because of the competition in Calibo. The business competition is much complicated. So maybe he wants chill-chill lang dito sa New Washington. And at the same time, nandyan ang port. So the people here are moving, they come and they go. So it's good for negosyo, good for business. And he, Cardinal Sin, was the 14th among the 16 children. The mother is, the father is Juan Sin. The mother is Maxima Reyes La Chica, who is from New Washington, but has also roots from Calibo, family roots in Calibo. And so, well, of the 16, talagang yung nag-survive, yung tumanda, ay siyam lang, including Cardinal Sin. No? He was like a best friend to his brother Ramon, who is a doctor. Now, Cardinal Sin, according to his narrative, was the favorite son, favorite child of his mother. Why? Because according to him, there are two reasons. Number one, he was very sickly. He was asthmatic that needed attention from his mother, Maxima. Second, according to Cardinal Sin, he became the favorite child of his mother because he was the most ugly. He was the ugliest, according to him. Look at his face. There is an evolution of face. And look, when he became a priest, he became handsome. So when if you are thinking that you are ugly, you better proceed to priesthood. I think that is the best solution for your physical physical shortcomings. And look at the evolution. It proves that as he progresses in his seminary life, he is getting more handsome. I can prove that. Look at me, huh? And compare my photos when I was in high school, when I was in college, when I was first year theology, no, and my face now. Oh. Well, kidding aside, he entered. Of course, he finished his studies here, and then he entered the seminary. He entered the Saint Vincent Ferrer Seminary in Haro. That was the dream of his mother to have a priest son, because during that time it was very prevalent that to have a priest in the family is the pride of the family to have a priest son in the family, no? But that is to the dismay of the father, Juan Sin, because that is not his dream for Jimmy or for Ami. His dream is for Jaime, Jimmy, Ami to become a businessman like him. Well, while he was in the seminary, it was interrupted because of the World War II. No? So he has to go back to Calibo. He has to go back rather to New Washington. And then their family fled to the mountains during the war. For 3 years, they were hiding from the Japanese for almost 3 years. And in 1945, he was still convinced that he wants to become a priest. And so he went back to the seminary and continued his seminary formation. But unfortunately, he was very, very sickly. He was asthmatic. Um, he is always absent in their seminary activities. He could not join in the sports, etc. He always misses his classes. So his seminary formators advised him to go out. Here comes Jaime Sin. Seminarian Jaime Sin. What did he do? He wrote a letter addressed to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And he told Mama Mary, if you want me to become a priest, cure me of my asthma. Ora mismo. He was cured of his asthma. And Jaime Cardinal Sin would always narrate that for him that was a miracle. He became a priest. He was supposed to be sent to Rome to study canon law, but he asked the bishop of the Diocese of Capiz, sabi niya, no, I can't. I want to preach. I want to teach catechesis. So he was sent to the mountains, and for a short time, he stayed there until the convent was raided by a robber. And when this incident was reported to the bishop called Jaime Sin, the young Jaime Sin, sabi niya, I cannot lose you. You have a potential. I cannot lose you there. Your life is dangerous, so you have to stay here. And they have also seen the potential in Jaime Cardinal Sin of his leadership skills. So he was also made the first rector of St. Pope Pius X Seminary in Rojas City. And he proved himself to be a very good administrator, a good leader, a good formator, and a very, very good, how do I say that, fundraiser. Until, well, to make the story short, he was made auxiliary bishop of Haro, and he replaced Archbishop Jose Maria Cuenco. He became the Archbishop of Haro, in Iloilo. He was made the CBCP president, the rise of sin. Talagang he made it through the ranks. Okay, the CBCP president, and, well, he was assigned and he was appointed as the Archbishop of Manila. For your information, when he arrived in Manila, you know who welcomed here at the port? He was welcomed by no other than the First Lady of the Philippines, Madam Imelda Marcos. And they became very good friends, very good collaborator of the government, a good friend of Imelda. In fact, there was a joke that Imelda would visit him at Villa San Miguel, and then they would talk, and then he would jokingly tell Imelda, you should go home because it's already late at night, and it's not good for people to see us together late at night in my house. It's not good for them to see that you are still in the house of sin late at night. There was a very, very good relationship. No? Now, let's go to his the life of sin. The interesting story about sin was when he was already in Manila. By the way, in Manila, if you go to Manila, at the southeast corner of the intersection of EDSA and Ortigas Avenue stand the Shrine of Mary, Queen of Peace, popularly known as the Our Lady of EDSA. And according to a high-ranking official at the Archdiocese of Manila, this property was donated by the Gokongwei family. They were convinced to donate a portion of their prime commercial property for the construction of the shrine, lest their business suffer the consequence of a potential public backlash. Now it stands as a memorial of the People Power Revolution, which ended the Marcos regime and restored democracy to the nation. Its most visible feature is the bronze statue of the Blessed Mother, which serves as a continuous reminder to the Catholic faithful of how her mediation was instrumental in toppling the Marcos dictatorship. The essential truth is this, that it was only in the latter part of the regime, of the Marcos regime, that the Catholic hierarchy became very vocal. Became very vocal against the faults of the regime. But actually, the Protestant churches, even at its early stage, they were already vocal against the atrocities that happened during martial law. So, this is what I am telling you, that there is a collaboration among different institutions of faith, and we will see in this topic or in this talk the roles that they made in ending the martial law era. Now, let's go to the second part. It's the Sitz im Leben der Kirche, the life situation of the church, the context of the church during that time. Before the foundation or before the creation of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, which was formed or created in 1967, the forerunner of the CBCP or the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines was the Catholic Welfare Organization or the CWO, and it was mostly focused on the spiritual domain. When it was created in 1945, that was after the war, and its involvement in the social, economic, political structure of the country, which focused on charity or welfare. Although the Catholic Welfare Organization remained mostly concerned with the internal church issues, some of its members became more involved in socio-political issues as street rallies and demonstrations started becoming common in Metro Manila during the 1960s. So put this picture in your mind that in the 1960s, rallies and demonstrations were always staged, were prevalent during that time, 1960s to 1980s, 1970s. No? And if that is what is happening in Manila in the 1960s, what is happening within the Catholic Church? 1960s. Second, I love Aprintado. That's why now I know. Nawala tuloy ako. Second Vatican Council. The Pope during that time was John the 23rd. It was John the 23rd that convened the Second Vatican Council in 1962. That was in October, it was on October 11, 1962, and it ended on December 8, 1965. But it was no longer John the 23rd. No? It was already Pope Paul the Sixth. Now, Saint Paul the Sixth. No? Now, in the previous convocation, Vatican I, which seemingly an open-ended council, but history would say that it started from 1869 and it ended at 1870, so parang 1 year lang. Ba? The emphasis of the First Vatican Council was the importance of papacy, the primacy of the papacy and the infallibility of the church's dogma. That was the focus during that time. But the liturgical movement was already existing, moving. The Second Vatican Council was actually a departure from that tradition. Merong iba, when John the 23rd convened the council, what did he say? Let us open the windows of the church. Very good. What's that? Aggiornamento. There are two things. Number one, we have to go back to the sources. We have to go back to the sources and revisit the Via Apostolica, the way of the apostles, the way of the first Christians, how they celebrate the liturgy, how they approach issues, how they practice the faith, Via Apostolica. Let us go back to the fathers, the sources. Didache, Apostolic, the Traditio Apostolica, Hippolytus, Justin the Martyr, all these, the church fathers. We have to go back there. Okay? And the second one is aggiornamento. Updating. John the 23rd would say, we have to observe and see the signs of the time. Aggiornamento. This is the reason why that the first document in the Second Vatican Council is the Sacrosanctum Concilium, which is the Constitution on Sacred Liturgy, and it already speaks as early as 1965, as early in the 1960s, it already speaks of inculturation. Diyos ko, ang tourism ngayon, nagsalita about cultural appropriation in the 1960s. It has already been tackled by the church. Inculturation, respect of culture, the differences, the diversity, unity in diversity, the Trinitarian concept, that the Father is not the Son is not the Father, and the Holy Spirit is not the Father and the Son. The differences, the unity, the different charisms, the ministry, lay empowerment. Nandiyan na yan. Interestingly, the second document that was released after the Sacrosanctum Concilium, if you would see the Second Vatican Council, is the document entitled Inter Mirifica. Reading the signs of time. Imagine the 1960s, the church is already talking about social media, social communications, computers, internet, radios. Now, it's a departure from the tradition, as it was the Pope's desire to make the church more involved in addressing the spiritual impoverishment of modern society resulting from the deep social political transformations it had been undergoing over the previous decades. The Council produced 16 documents, including the Pastoral Constitution entitled Gaudium et Spes. Very good. And what is the Gaudium et Spes? It signaled a new emphasis in the Roman Catholic teaching on the role of the church in the struggle against justice. It is a pastoral document that promotes peace, economic equality, talks about politics. It has two themes, the gift of self and the promotion of peace. The Gaudium et Spes. So medyo may ganyan ng may trend na, amat-amat. It was also around that time that the secular movement such as the New Left and the Civil Rights Movement of the United States of America, also influenced a significant minority within the church. Ultimately, the ideology that seemed to have the most impact among Philippine clergy was what kind of theology? It originated in Latin America. Liberation theology. Liberation theology, notably the writings of Gustavo Gutierrez and Paulo Freire. No? So, what is liberation theology? It is the liberation of the oppressed, the liberation of the oppressed from political and economic inequality. At the same time, liberation from the unjust or from injustices and the struggles of the marginalized. No? So you have to be liberated from these, pero with the help of scriptures, with the help of spiritual, or with how do I say that? Striking political and economic inequality with spiritual intervention, something like that. No? Now, there is a conservative faction, Mother. On the other hand, there was also a conservative interpretation of church doctrine which assigns the role of interpreting the moral principles in temporal affairs to the ecclesiastical hierarchy. Hence, human rights are interpreted to be based on clear natural rights of man on which the church could pass a critical judgment, such as abortion. It was this conservative faction that dominated the church hierarchy when President Ferdinand Marcos placed the Philippines under martial law in 1972. Accordingly, Cardinal Rufino Santos, the Archbishop of Manila from 1953 to 1973, welcomed its imposition. So the churches was, well, in the beginning, was not, totally against martial law. In fact, Cardinal Rufino Santos welcomed martial law. And even the CBCP, which was founded in 1960s, released a statement from its administrative council on September 26, 1972. And the journal Anamnesis details the salient points of the statement coming from the CBCP. Number one, there are three points coming from the CBCP regarding the introduction of martial law. Number one, the bishops, and sakto talaga, dumating ang obispo. Welcome, Bishop. Number one, this is coming from the CBCP journal Anamnesis that details the salient points. Number one, the bishops recognize the authority of civil authorities to protect the sovereignty of the state, to ensure peace and prosperity. So the CBCP affirms martial law as a means to protect or to ensure peace and prosperity in the country. And it is a prerogative of the civil authority to declare martial law. And they affirm the authority of the government officials of the Philippines. But the second one, they warn the government, the public authorities, that they must exercise their duties. So here already, in this document, the CBCP has already have a foresight of the possible effect of martial law, because they warned the public authorities that they must exercise their duties with utmost prudence and restraint, with full respect for human dignity, and void the least abuse in the discharge of their duties. The number 3 point, coming from the CBCP, they they commended they commended President Ferdinand Marcos and thanked him for giving them an assurance that martial law will not be prolonged. So it's also like they thanked President Marcos that that martial law will not be prolonged. It's also a warning that you should not really prolong martial law. As martial law entered its first year, CBCP continued to have confidence in the regime as it stated that the government's program of land reform, peace and order, good government, more equitable distribution of wealth are all worthwhile in themselves and look towards a total human development of our people, especially of the common tao, especially the great mass of the underprivileged among us. But on the other hand, I'm not so sure if I think Bishop Cor is very familiar with this. There is what you call the Magnificent Seven. The Magnificent Seven. They are called the Magnificent Seven Bishops. Number 1, Julio Labayen. Number 2, Antonio Fortich. Number 3, Felix Perez. Number 4, Orlando Quevedo, who is still now Cardinal Quevedo. Jesus Varela, Francisco Claver, and Federico Escalera. They wrote an open letter directly addressed to President Marcos in one of the earliest, if not the first, instances when members of the Catholic hierarchy spoke strongly against the atrocities committed by the regime. And what is the essential truth here? The essential truth is that despite the encouragement of the Second Vatican Council for more active participation in social issues, members of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines remained mostly concerned with internal church matters. Only very few bishops were very vocal against the government during the early years after the declaration of martial law. Why? Why do you think? Because there is an existing division in the Catholic hierarchy. In fact, may tatlo silang grupo. Number 1 is the minority traditionalists. Number 2, the radical minority. And number 3 is the moderate group. Let's see kung sino yung sa minority traditionalists, sino sa radical minority, and kung sino yung sa moderate lang, yung dito lang sa gitna. Now, these opposing statements from members of the traditionally conservative CBCP were indicative of 3 identifiable divisions. First, as I have mentioned, the minority traditionalists or conservatives, composed of about 15 bishops, who advocated that the church must confine its activities to spiritual matters and keep out of secular affairs. Does it sound familiar? The most notable among them was the Archbishop of Cebu, Cardinal Julio Rosales. Medyo may issue sa kanya. Bakit siya tag na siya ang he is the one who best represented the minority traditionalist group. Why? Because he was close to the Romualdez family. And along with his conservative allies, regarded the more progressive members of the church as a threat, not just to the government, but to their leadership as well. The effectivity, their influence as the leaders of the church. The second group are the radical minority, which included the outspoken Jesuit Bishop Francisco Claver of Malaybalay, Bukidnon. 7 out of 10 bishops belonging to this group had dioceses in Mindanao and had a broad base of clergy and laity organized through provincial and local groups such as the Mindanao Sulu Secretariat of Social Action. This group worked in close collaboration with the very influential association. It is the AMRSP, the Association of Major Religious Superiors of the Philippines, founded in July 1969, which was very active in the marginalized groups such as the urban poor in Tondo, peasant groups, and the indigenous people such as the Kalinga and Bontoc who resisted the Chico Dam project. Later, this Bishop Francisco Claver of Malaybalay, Bukidnon, soon as we progress in our story, this being vocal of Francisco Claver will also be continued by the next Bishop Gaudencio Rosales of Malaybalay. Women who were part of the AMRSP, of course the religious sisters, were particularly prominent in major demonstrations during the 1970s. As reports of widespread torture by the regime started to spread, they established task force detainees during their annual convention in January 1974. Now, what did they say? What was their cry? Ito mga religious sisters. Sabi nila, we refuse to merely confine ourselves to prayer. Huwag nyo lang kaming padasalin, no? Padasalin. We want to stage demonstrations. We want to go out and be vocal against the atrocities of the regime. Notably, members of this group also engaged with members of the National Council of Churches in the Philippines, or the NCCP, which was founded in 1963 as an ecumenical fellowship of non-Roman Catholic denominations in the Philippines. This type of engagement was actually encouraged by the Second Vatican Council, where Protestant observers were invited to participate. Now, the third group, in the Catholic hierarchy, the moderate group, composed of the majority bishops of the CBCP. Manila Archbishop Jaime Cardinal Sin, who maintained a policy. Ano ang kanyang policy? Alala nyo ba? Matandaan pa ninyo? Critical collaboration. This is his policy. And the Archbishop of Manila, Jaime Cardinal Sin, who maintained the policy, or his policy, critical collaboration with the regime rather than critical opposition that was adopted by more radical elements of the church, best represented this group. So Cardinal Sin belonged to the moderate group. For the most part, Cardinal Sin accepted the government's justification for martial law and even argued that abuses against human rights were more accidental acts by individual military officers than a deliberate policy of the regime itself. You get me? So para sa kanya, yung mga masamang nangyayari, hindi yun talaga polisiya ng gobyerno, kundi ang may problema, itong yung mga nasa ilalim, mga military officers. So, for him, they are more of accidental acts by individual military officers. They are not a deliberate policy of the regime itself. He believed that this approach was effective in creating a stable link between the people and their government amid the lingering danger of a communist rebellion, and that his cordial relationship with Marcos allowed him a degree of moral influence. Nonetheless, he did question the issue of press censorship, as well as the ambiguity in the government's definition of subversion when he was installed as Archbishop of Manila in 1974. So he asked for a clarification to clarify kung ano talaga pag sinabi kang or if you are accused of subversion, ano ba talaga? The essential truth is this, that the church hierarchy has been, during the time, has been dominated by moderates and was not united in its opposition to martial law. This is in the 1970s. Now, eto na, iba ng usapan. This is the start. Why? Because amat-amat, the Catholic Church is feeling the effects of martial law. It is when religious leaders became victims of martial law. As the ideological divide among church hierarchy were likely undetermined or undermined rather its capacity to pose an institutional threat to martial law, church-affiliated institutions and clergy felt the iron hand of the regime. 62 priests, 9 nuns, and 50 lay leaders were arrested between 1972 and 1973 by the military. Also arrested were Protestants engaged in social justice work among the peasantry and urban poor. Foreign activists were common targets of the regime, such as 2 American priests were deported in October 1972. An Italian priest, Father Jose Naku, who was active in Zone 1 in Tondo, was jailed for his alleged links with the NPA, New People's Army. And there were 2 Italian priests, Father Francesco Alessi and Luigi Conchino, were deported in January 1976 on subversion charges. The deportation of the Italian priests drew the attention of the conservative Cardinal Julio Rosales, with the Vatican even accusing the regime of engaging in a witch hunt. Medyo na-alarm na si Cardinal Julio Rosales when the Vatican commented that there is a witch hunt in the Philippines. And the witch hunt is happening among the priests. The priests are now being hunted. The religious are now being hunted. This spate of arrests during the first year of martial law led to the creation of the Church Military Liaison Committee, or the CMLC, in November 1973 as a forum where military authorities and representatives of the Catholic Church could discuss problems affecting both institutions. However, the CMLC proved useless in the light of 2 raids that took place in 1974. In June 1974, they raided the house of a Protestant preacher, Reverend Paul Wilson, and arrested top NCCP leaders. As for Cardinal Sin, his impression of the Marcos regime changed drastically after an event that took place 2 months later. That happened on August 24, 1974. That was very, very crucial. Why? Because that was the turning point of Jaime Cardinal Sin that made the church hierarchy more vocal against martial law. What happened on August 24, 1974? 150 military men, 150 military men raided the Sacred Heart Novitiate. It's like a seminary. A novitiate it's a Jesuit seminary. It's a Jesuit formation house. The Sacred Heart Novitiate in Novaliches, in search of Community Party of the Philippines leader Jose Maria Sison, Joma Sison. Now, as Sison was nowhere to be found, the military instead, naku po, they arrested the Jesuit provincial superior, Father Benigno Benimayo, na napagkamalan. Napagkamalan na si Joma Sison because he was riding the same car, he was riding same car model of Joma Sison, which is the Volkswagen Beetle. Hinuli nila si Father Mayo. And they also arrested Jesuit priest Jose Blanco, an alleged leader of an anti-government organization, and 21 Student Catholic Action SCA youth leaders who were attending a workshop in that novitiate, that seminary. A week after the raid, Cardinal Sin read a strong worded letter drafted by the Association of Major Religious Superiors of the Philippines at a protest mass at the Manila Cathedral with over 5,000 religious in attendance. Shortly thereafter, following a briefing by the Jesuit provincial, he released a pastoral letter that was read in all churches. The actions were his first real official acts in denouncing the regime, wherein he realized the potential of the church as an opposition force. What is the essential truth? The essential truth is that Cardinal Sin only became more vocal in opposing martial law after the raid of the Sacred Heart Novitiate on August 24, 1974. In an attempt to legitimize continuing martial law, the Marcos government laid out a series of plebiscites and elections to ratify the 1973 Constitution and create a new government. As the electoral process for these changes took place, the CBCP seemed to become more concerned about the climate suppression created by the regime, albeit in a rather cautious manner. In February 1975, for example, they gently suggested that the referendum done through citizens' assemblies were subjected to a climate of surveillance and fear, and that the state should provide the necessary safeguards to allow citizens to vote according to their conscience. Another statement issued in a constitutional referendum in October of 1976 to approve the continuation of martial law was even less confrontational. While seeking similar reassurances for the freedom to vote according to their consciences, the CBCP emphasized that they do not want to prejudge the sincerity of the government. So medyo ano pa rin, medyo chill-chill pa rin ang approach. No? While it is apparent that the conservatives in the CBCP have taken a rather docile approach towards the regime, radical bishops and the AMRSP, the Association of Major Religious Superiors of the Philippines, have opposed this manner of voting since it was used to ratify the 1973 Constitution and denounced the February 1975 referendum as a mockery of democracy and a ploy by Marcos to stay in power. This confrontational approach was highlighted when 5,000 demonstrators led by church activists clashed with police in a protest against the October 1976 referendum to create the interim Batasang Pambansa. Now, there is what you call the developing dissent. What is it? Before the elections for said body took place, Cardinal Sin, in his capacity as Archbishop of Manila, by the way, when we note that Cardinal Sin is the Archbishop of Manila, you have to also consider the vast of his influence, because during that time the Archbishop of Manila was not divided into different dioceses. Even now you have a diocese of Antipolo, the diocese of Cubao, Parañaque, diocese of Pasig. During that time, the Archdiocese of Manila comprises talagang ang lawak-lawak, kalaki-laki. So you have to also consider the influence of the Archbishop of of Manila during the time. No? He issued a pastoral letter that was read at all masses, starting that martial law had deprived the citizens of the right to choose their leader, and that the forthcoming elections had to be free and fair for the sake of having normalization in society. After the elections were subsequently held on April 7, 1978, the CBCP 76, the CBCP issued an open letter to expose the election fraud that took place during the process. By this time, Cardinal Sin was already the CBCP president, and in that capacity issued a lengthy pastoral letter which accused the national leadership of violating certain human rights. Although the CBCP under Cardinal Sin's leadership seemed to become more vocal in challenging the regime, he retained his approach of, what was his approach? Critical. In a 1978 pastoral letter, for example, Sin did not make any direct accusation at Marcos, nor did he imply that human rights violations were widespread. Nonetheless, he had been questioning the detention of prisoners under the ambiguous charge of subversion, very good, since 1974, and even questioned the government's role in the killing of Marsman Alvarez and Santiago Arce. Sin was also responsible for an investigation into prison conditions which resulted in the dismissal of 37 enlisted men when a hunger strike by imprisoned priests Ed de la Torre and Manuel Lajos gained international attention. Meanwhile, this influential MARSP had become more active in publishing reports about human rights violation in mimeographed copies of an information sheet called Signs of the Times, which eventually reached a circulation in the tens of thousands. Their office was raided by military in December 1976. Merong holding back. However, many powerful conservatives in the CBCP who remained in agreement with Marcos reforms expressed concern about the radicalization of younger priests who were suspected of having communist leanings. It even seemed that the Vatican was more supportive of the conservatives, as local bishops involved in social and political activities were reprimanded when two cardinals from the Vatican visited in November 1976. Napagalitan pa sila tuloy, no? But usually, priests are suspected of having communist leanings because of the message of the gospel seemingly look similar to the ideologies of communism. But one thing is for sure, it is far different from the ideology of communism. First, communism does not believe, and of course, priests do believe in God. While some factions within the CBCP have acted in unison from time to time with the AMRSP, ideological divisions within the church still seemed irreconcilable until the late 1970s when the church hierarchy accepted a working compromise with the Marcos regime. By 1979, however, the country's social, economic, and political situation continued to worsen while militarization and repression rose, prompting the CBCP to come out with a pastoral letter entitled Exhortation Against Violence. From the tone of Cardinal Sin's writing, he was worried that poverty among the marginalized sectors of society was making revolutionary groups an attractive option not just to the urban and rural poor, but also to intellectuals, students, and religious personnel. As such, he believed that martial law was actually the more acceptable condition at the time, and that it would eventually be lifted by President Marcos. Cardinal Sin viewed President Marcos as a bright, brilliant, and not emotional among all the dictators of the world. Once the country's political situation normalizes, Cardinal Sin believed that anyway, sooner or later, President Marcos will lift martial law. The political situation remained unchanged over the next 2 years, but merong patikim. Merong patikim. The president lifted martial law in time for the visit of, in 1981, the Pope John Paul II. President Marcos lifted martial law in February of 1981. Now, what is the essential truth? I keep on saying the essential, the important truth. The essential truth is that even if the church hierarchy had started becoming openly critical of how elections were being held during the 1970s, Cardinal Sin continued his policy, critical collaboration with the regime because he feared that he has not yet conceptualized the EDSA revolution. It was out of his mind, no? What he was only thinking is that the only other alternative to martial law at that time was a communist revolution. So sabi niya, better na lang status quo. Kesa naman communist revolution. Mas okay ang medyo this is the lesser evil. So he has to make a compromise. Now, I just want to clarify that during these years, other faiths were very, very active, no? And there was a participation of other faiths like the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, the UCCP, the Agripayan Church, the National Council of Churches in the Philippines, the NCCP, which I mentioned. So, this is not just, in fact, to their credit, the Catholic hierarchy led by the conservative Cardinal Rosales condemned the June 1974 raid on the NCCP and the deportation of the Protestant ministers. So the Protestant ministers were also deported. They also suffered, during the regime. This is not only about the Catholic Church. Other faiths participated. The essential truth is that leaders of Protestant denominations also fought for, this is my point, that other Protestant leaders also fought for social justice during the martial law era and were also subjected to the iron hand of the regime. Apektado din sila. Although Protestant opposition to the martial law regime may not have seemed to be as significant as its Catholic counterpart, that the deportation of Wilson brought global awareness to the regime's excesses. Marcos was subsequently denounced by the Geneva-based World Council of Churches, and the issue of political prisoners was reported to the United States Senate Subcommittee in December 1975. And the involvement of the latter may have led to a toning down of abuses by the regime, at least during the administrative, during the time of President Jimmy Carter, and was probably an item on the agenda during Vice President Walter Mondale's visit to the Philippines in May 1978. How about the Muslims, Father? If you are saying that other faiths participated, how about our Muslim brothers and sisters? They were also affected. But hindi naman kasi sa kaila bago ang conflict, no? The conflict is not new to them. There is always a conflict between them and the government. And it was always political rather than religious. Okay? And according to this dean of the University of the Philippines Islamic Department of Islamic Studies, iba ang approach. Kasi Islam is a community-based religion in which doctrines could differ among different barangays or even from mosque to mosque depending on the ulama's scholarship. So iba-iba ang concept, iba-iba ang leadership. Meron silang, kung sa atin medyo barangay, sa kanila may mga barangay chapter, from mosque to mosque iba. iba-iba ang concept, depende sa kanilang leader, depende sa kanilang community. And this is the difference between the Islamic communities and the Catholic Church. Why? Unlike the Catholic Church, Islam in Mindanao does not have a central hierarchy. Like for example, we have a central like the CBCP. Wala silang ganon. Now, pwedeng maglista sila and then we continue. Wala silang Rome, wala silang Pope. So, kanya-kanya. So, medyo mahirap, wala silang common stand, no? So, they do not have a central hierarchy such as CBCP capable of taking a united stand on religious or for that matter political issues. As such, the involvement of the ulama in politics has always been aligned at the community level and usually depended on local politicians' agenda. Now, what was the impact of the 1981 papal visit on martial law? On January 30, 1980, local elections for governors, vice governors, mayors, and vice mayors were held for the first time since the declaration of martial law. So meron ng may parang nag-iba ang ihip ng hangin. As expected, the polls were practically swept by Marcos Kilusang Bagong Lipunan. And due to flagrant dishonesties and manifest anomalies, several bishops, most notably the famous Archbishop Oscar Cruz of the Archdiocese of San Fernando, mounted protests against the results, thereby delaying a planned visit of Pope John Paul II to the Philippines that year. Although the Second Vatican Council provided an impetus for the Church to support struggles for social justice, as I have mentioned earlier, the Pope, ito medyo may confused na sila. The Pope had been warning the clergy against being involved in politics, most notably in a speech before the Latin American Bishops' Conference in January 1979. And this reminder of priests engaging in politics and they are being discouraged to engage, this message of Pope John Paul II, which was addressed to the Latin American bishops, was reiterated when he came here in 1981, during his visit here in the Philippines in 1981. I quote, "You are priests and religious. You are not social or political leaders or officials of a temporal power." I am quoting the words of John Paul II. Sabi pa niya, sinabi pa niya dito, natawa ko, mukhang sinabi niya, mga pare ilusyonada. Sabi niya, "Let us not be under the illusion that we are serving the gospel if we dilute our charisma through an exaggerated interest in the wide field of temporal problems." No? Sometimes we invoke our involvement, we justify our involvement rather by invoking the gospel, the scriptures. Pero sabi ni Pugdamba, let us not be under the illusion that we are serving the gospel if we dilute our charisma through an exaggerated interest in the wide field of temporal. The essential truth is that Pope John Paul II was not in favor of clergy being directly involved in social justice issues and that martial law atrocities continued soon after he visited the country. Sad. And actually, ganito din ang this is also, as I have mentioned, ganito rin ang sinabi niya sa mga Latin American bishops, which he regretted. It is in his diary, it's in the diary of John Paul II, that he felt so guilty of parang sabi niya, it's as if I did nothing. Referring to kay Padre Oscar Romero, no? You know, I think he's now blessed or he is a saint. Saint Oscar Romero. You know, it is in the diary of John Paul II that he really felt guilty of what had happened to Oscar Romero because this was the tone of his message in Latin America and in the Philippines na medyo may connect, medyo may similarity sa nangyayari. No? Now, there was also a defiance in the South, and the defiance of the South, as I have mentioned kanina, is coming from the bishops. Especially, kanino? From the Malaybalay Bishop, Gaudencio Rosales. Mindanao is the region where the atrocities of the martial law regime were extremely felt, and Bukidnon, which primarily had an agrarian economy, was practically where communist movements in Mindanao began. The favorite place of our NPS yung Bukid-Bukid. So it began in Bukidnon. His diocese had a radio station that was mostly manned by UP educated rebels. After the military confiscated their equipment, they came up with a weekly publication, Ang Bandilyo. It became the most informative local media in Bukidnon and had also been respected by the military. Now, if there was this dissent coming from the South, there was also a dissent, especially in the 1980s. It started in 1982, a very, very strong dissent in the capital. To allay their concerns about more clerics resorting to radical means of changing the society, the CBCP released a statement in November 1982 reiterating the Pope's message that the Church was more concerned with spiritual salvation and had no interest in politics. Now, let's move forward. By February 1983, however, the CBCP seemed to become more direct in calling out the government on issues such as detention of priests and religious workers, the reliance on multinational corporations for economic development, and even the holding of the lavish Metro Manila International Film Festival in its joint pastoral letter entitled A Dialogue for Peace. In that letter, this is in 1983, the CBCP asserted that dissent, when legitimate, should not be readily interpreted as subversion. Uy, iba ito hindi to subversion. This is just a legitimate dissent. Later that year, they were even more forthright in addressing the atrocities of the Marcos regime by directly asking him to abolish the Presidential Commitment Order, which authorizes arrest without bail on arbitrary charges of subversion. Staying true to his policy of critical collaboration, Cardinal Sin called for the creation of a Council of National Reconciliation composed of representatives from the church, government, and opposition. In the wake of the assassination of former Senator Benigno Aquino in August of 1983, since political posturing became more pronounced, especially since the country had already been experiencing an economic downturn. So medyo umiinit na si Cardinal Sin. Umiinit na siya. Now, at ano yung initial step niya na medyo talagang may impact sa simbahan at sa lipunan? As a means of pressuring the government not to dilly-dally on its investigation on Aquino's assassination, Cardinal Sin ordered all Philippine Roman Catholic churches to ring their bells 21 times each day starting September 16 of 1983. So imagine. Pero medyo, sino bang hindi makukulitan? Every day, they have to ring the bell 21 times. No? To remind the government not to delay the investigation. Although this was tantamount to a public protest, reconciliation with the regime was still Cardinal Sin's main call as an alternative to bloodbath of revolution. Because this is always what he wants to, he has always wanted to avoid blood, revolution, communist revolution, bloodbath of revolution. By this time, however, the church had started publishing Veritas News Magazine, a more effective medium of communication for the middle class and business sector, which had emerged as an opposition force to the Marcos regime. Now, the Catholic Church, now let's proceed to the 1984 and 1986 elections. What role did the church play in the 1984 and 1986 elections? No? Very, very crucial. The Catholic Church hierarchy had always expressed their concerns about freedom and fairness in the run-up to national elections since the beginning of martial law, while encouraging the public to exercise right to vote according to their conscience. Hence, when certain sectors planned to boycott yet another plebiscite on the 1973 Constitution, as well as the upcoming preparations for the May 1984 Philippine parliamentary elections, the CBCP encouraged voter participation in a pastoral letter and published an article by National Citizens Movement for Free Elections, popularly known as NAMFREL. And who was the chairman of NAMFREL? Jose Concepcion Jr., known as Jocon. He passed, I think, last year. He passed. In its official publication, CBCP Monitor. CBCP Monitor, actually we are still subscribing, no, to CBCP Monitor to emphasize the election's importance. Unlike in previous polls since martial law, the CBCP had been aware that the citizenry was more awakened in their desire for change in the aftermath of Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr.'s assassination. So medyo now ang tao medyo mas mulat na after the assassination, especially since it was taking place just as the inquiry into the assassination was being undertaken by the Agraba Fact-Finding Board. And after over a year of inquiries, it had been determined that the former senator's death was the result of a military conspiracy. Pero medyo hindi convinced ang CBCP sa sabi nilang result ng kanilang investigation na military conspiracy, no? According to the CBCP, they did not see the job as completely done and insinuated that the board failed to include the name of the mastermind behind Aquino's slay. Until now, we still do not know who is the mastermind, no? Apart from that, the CBCP also became increasingly concerned with human rights violations, which had seemed to be worsening. Now, that was in 1983. 1984, the first anniversary of Ninoy Aquino's death approached. The CBCP issued a joint pastoral letter that clearly outlined the acts of violence that were perpetuated by the regime, such as ongoing salvagings, quote-unquote, and liquidations, quote-unquote, and reminded that the faithful of the tens of thousands of lives lost during the government's campaigns against the Moro National Liberation Front during the 1970s. The letter also stated that political killings were becoming more prevalent and there was a real fear of a bloodbath due to the growing clashes between the military and the NPA. Notably, the CBCP concluded their letter by expressing the need to address the abuses of secret marshals, the widespread salvaging taking place, and the effects of the economic crisis. Although it was not explicitly addressed to the government, the calls to revamp our entire economic and political structure could only have been aimed, of course, kanino pa ba? To the government, which is the center of power. Now, there was silence from the state. In the year that passed since 1984 pastoral letter, it was apparent that the government did not address any of the CBCP's concerns. Ano lang, laylo lang, status quo. The CBCP even stressed how state-sanctioned violence worsened due to abuses by parliamentary groups such as the Civilian Home Defense Forces and cult-based counterinsurgency units, and called for their dismantling. Now, in 1985, December of 1985, issue of CBCP Monitor, a letter by the Episcopal Commission of Tribal Filipinos was published to request the release of Lawag Parish priest, Father Ted Remigio. A more significant article published in that issue, however, was a pastoral letter from Cardinal Sin and other bishops on the upcoming snap presidential elections of February 7, 1986. The pastoral letter released by the CBCP in December 1985 was basically a rehash of similar letters that were read in preparation for similar political exercises in the past with the usual call, kahit ngayon, ito pa rin ang the usual call for peaceful and honest process. However, the letter that Cardinal Sin has disseminated on the Feast of the Santo Niño in January included portions spelled out in upper letters, nakakapital lahat, stressing how the snap election should not become, nakalagay in capital letters, one more national scandal. It should not be one more national scandal, but the snap election should be a new beginning, a capital letter. So there was really an emphasis. Moreover, Sin also called on voters to resist the offer of money in exchange for votes and warned, grabe, ito na yung pagmalakasan. Kasi sabi niya, he addressed the voters not to receive money from the candidates in exchange for their votes and warned the candidates. So, dalawang na-address, the voters, and he also addressed the candidates who will win by cheating. And meron siyang may dineclare siya, sabi niya, those who win by cheating will be ineligible for divine forgiveness. Gusto mo yon? Imagine, if you will win by cheating, you will be ineligible for divine forgiveness. Despite the call for prayer to avoid such events, massive fraud and irregularities did take place, and the CBCP did not mince words in its post-election statement. According to a high-ranking church official, the Vatican ordered the bishops to refrain from issuing any statement denouncing the elections. However, the ever-vocal bishop, you know him, he's still, he's now a bishop emeritus, he's now retired. Bishop Teodoro Bacani maintained that such an order was against the principle of subsidiarity outlined in Vatican II, which assumes that Episcopal Conference of Bishops know what is best for their communities. Ano naman ang alam nyo? Nakaupo kayo dun sa loob ng inyong mga palasyo. May Swiss guards kayo. Paano naman kami dito? You do not know what is happening here in the Philippines. And although there were bishops allied with the Marcoses who protested against the statement, it was approved unanimously and read to the public in Luneta. Now, February 13, 1986. Kailan nangyari? Kailan nagtapos ang EDSA 1? February 25, 1986. Now we are getting nearer. We're already on February 13, 1986. Cebu Archbishop Ricardo Cardinal Vidal, in his capacity, he was then the CBCP president, called the government out for engaging in the following acts. Number 1, the systematic disenfranchisement of voters. Number 2, the widespread and massive vote buying. And number 3, the deliberate tampering with election returns. And number 4, intimidation, harassment, terrorism, and murder. Moreover, it commended the computer technicians who walked out of the COMELEC tabulation center in what they referred to as shining examples of the non-violent struggle for justice. We were just talking about this topic. I was talking, Bishop Cor was sharing with me this topic in one of our breakfast. No? Yung pag-walk out ng COMELEC mismo. And it was the first time in the international church history that a moral judgment was passed on an electoral process. We would always say mathematics is an exact science. No, we always believe in numbers. That is scientific, that is logical, factual. But here comes, after the numbers were shown, after that election, the people imposed a moral judgment on the electoral process. Na iba. And Cardinal Vidal, because of that, even the CBCP stated that and passed on a moral judgment on that electoral process, and that statement received so many congratulatory messages. Cardinal Vidal received numerous messages of congratulations all over the world, which included a letter from New York Archbishop Cardinal John O'Connor and the Muslim Association of the Philippines. The more significant consequence of the delivery of that letter, however, may have come from Corazon Aquino. 2 million people. Now, February 13, today, anong date na yun? February 20. February 20, February 25. February 20 is the start. No? February 20, 2 million people joined her at a rally in Luneta to mount a civil disobedience campaign and a boycott of companies associated with Marcos cronies. What followed was a series of events that formed the narrative of EDSA People Power Revolution. Now, the title of our talk is The Miracle of EDSA, Revisiting EDSA Uno. Did a miracle take place in EDSA? Well, among those commended by the CBCP for their nonviolent struggle in its post-election pastoral letter were the millions of ordinary voters who kept the sanctity of their ballot untarnished. A huge number of those voters made their way to EDSA to support Defense Minister Juan Ponce Enrile and Lieutenant General Fidel Ramos who had broken off from the Marcos regime. Beyond that account, however, are more details about Cardinal Sin's engagement with Enrile and Ramos during the crucial days that eventually led to the departure of Marcos, on February 25, 1986. Now, this is where and when miracle happens. When you reach out to Sin. Enrile's first attempt to contact Cardinal Sin took place in the afternoon of February 22. So 2022 na. 1986, as he was making his way to Camp Aguinaldo. He asked his wife, Cristina Ponce Enrile, to call her friend, then the Philippine Inquirer publisher, Eugenia Egi Apostol, and tell her to contact Cardinal Sin. Instead of contacting the prelate, Apostol got in touch with fellow publisher Betty Go Belmonte, who then informed Cardinal Sin along with members of the foreign media about Enrile's plan to withdraw his support for President Marcos. Well, by the way, why is he reaching out to Cardinal Sin that he is withdrawing from the Marcos, from his support for President Marcos? Kasi during that time, according to what I've read, wala daw naniniwala na sa kanila. The people are confused. Wala na sa kanila naniniwala. Baka ano na naman ito, staged na naman, scripted na naman, it's another ploy, it's another... So, and really has to reach out to Sin para si Sin mismo magsabi sa mga tao. Siya na lang ang pinapaniwalaan. He's the only one credible, to speak what is really happening. Now, Cardinal Sin's secretary, who was then when this was happening, who was the secretary of Cardinal Sin? Socrates Villegas. Sabi naman when they contacted Cardinal Sin, sabi ni Father Soc, hindi pwede kasi si Cardinal Sin is about to leave Villa San Miguel in Mandaluyong para mag-ordain ng mga pare sa Loyola House of Studies sa Ateneo. So that was the time when he received the message from Belmonte informing Cardinal Sin of the planned defection of Enrile and Ramos. So he was initially cautious, not sure if it was a Marcos ploy. Yun nga, sabi. Even Cardinal Sin was, totoo ba to? Medyo to. Given the close relation, Cardinal Sin knew very well that Enrile, Ramos, and Marcos were very good friends. No? They're in close relation to the president. But realized that the defection was genuine when he got a phone call from Cristina Ponce Enrile asking for help. No? Asawa na mismo ni Enrile. So Sin, then, you know what happened? This is the beauty The miracle of Asia. When Cardinal Sin received that information from Cristina Enrile, sige, paalam mo na kayo kasi mag-ordain pa ako. But immediately, he contacted the sisters, the Poor Clares, the Franciscan sisters, the Poor Clares, the Carmelites, and the Pink Sisters, and told them to stop what they are doing. No? Whatever they are doing, please stop and pray for what he described as a spiritual battle. Kung nagugas ka ng pinggan, nagalabada ka, stop muna. Magdasayo, go to the chapel and pray for Enrile, for Ramos, for the Philippines, because what we are undergoing now a spiritual battle. At around 3 p.m., February 22, Enrile got a phone call from Father Edrain Dato of the Archdiocese of Manila's Radio Veritas, with whom he made the first public statement announcing his withdrawal of support for President Marcos. In another account of events, Cardinal Sin received a call. Ang description, he received a call from a trembling Enrile, at around the same time, who mentioned being in fear for his life and asked for the Cardinal's help. Cardinal Sin also briefed about what was happening in EDSA later that evening at Villa San Miguel by NAMFREL head Jocon, Jose Concepcion Jr. He then wrote his statement and after praying in the chapel, telephoned Radio Veritas to air his appeal to the faithful who were listening to the station for updates. And this appeal is now recorded. You can hear this appeal here in that room behind the scene. You will hear his voice. We have this a record of his voice. Sisters, I ask you to pray and pray for our dear good friends, Enrile and Ramos. Pray to our Blessed Virgin Mary that and we should avoid bloodshed. Ayan. You will hear that voice sa recording. Priests and nuns led hundreds. By the way, very, very important when he mentioned that Enrile and Ramos are two good friends. Very important yan. Therefore, sinasabihan niya ang society, ang Pilipinas na kakampiyan. Atin yan. Kaibigan yan. At paniwalaan nyo sila. Kasi they are very sincere, no? Of what they are doing. Now, priests and nuns led hundreds of thousands to EDSA during the ensuing days. But Cardinal Sin, ito naman si Cardinal Sin, siya ang tumawag ng tao papuntang EDSA, but he did not. He never went. He never went to EDSA himself. Why? He did not go to EDSA. Why? He himself, because he stuck himself to his conviction and duty to remain steadfast in prayer. He stayed in Villa San Miguel and remain steadfast in prayer. Prayer was a powerful force that made the miracle of Asia possible. Despite specific orders, this is the miracle. Despite specific orders from Marcos not to fire at the crowd gathered at EDSA, Marine Commandant Brigadier General Artemio Tadiar received an order to fire. This command was delegated to Colonel Braulio Balbas, who oversaw 2 battalions charged with assaulting Camp Crame. His troops were stopped at the corner of EDSA and Ortigas Avenue on February 23. The following morning, Tadiar gave Balbas the order to fire. Si Tadiar, he ordered Balbas, he reminded Balbas to order to fire artillery at the crowd. When the latter got clearance to do so from Major General Josephus Ramas, the commanding general of the Philippine Army. But to use his discretion, since the following command would result in the death of thousands, after intentionally delaying the execution of the command, Tadiar gave Balbas the order to return to Fort Bonifacio with his troops. The retreat of Balbas was a key moment that eventually led to a peaceful resolution. So the decision of a person really affected the whole nation. That's how important our decisions are. So please choose what is just, choose what is right, choose what is good, choose what is beautiful. Because your decision can really affect not only you, but the people, the community, and the whole nation. Just as you want to choose to become a priest, it affects the entire society. So you have to make good decisions, no? And that's where the miracle had happened, experienced miracle because of the decisions of certain people. And according to Cardinal Sin, however, as Balbas hesitated to carry out his order, the command to fire followed the chain of command to the lower ranking officer and reached the point in which the Marines were already aiming their guns at the crowd. It was then, now that is this popular story, it was then that a mysterious lady appeared before them, before these military men, aiming their guns at the crowd. There was this mysterious lady who appeared before them and asked them why they were going to shoot. No? So, merong babae daw who asked this military men, why are you going to shoot these people? Why are you going to shoot them? That question convinced the soldiers to lay down their arms. And this account of events was received by Cardinal Sin and is the reason why at the beginning of my talk, I narrated to you the construction of the shrine of Our Lady of EDSA. And this is the reason now, going back to that story, this is the reason why the Our Lady of EDSA shrine is where it is at today. Because of that story. And until now, we continue to attribute the success, the miracle of Asia, the miracle of EDSA, to the intercession and intervention of Our Lady, the Blessed Virgin Mary, Our Lady of EDSA, Our Lady of Peace. The essential truth is that the miracle that millions of faithful at EDSA came face to face in prayer against heavily armed troops without a single shot being fired. That's the miracle. Imagine, natalo ang mga artillery, natalo ng Rosario, natalo ng Our Lady ng imahe ng Fatima, natalo ng mga bulaklak, natalo ng dasal. The soldiers returned to barracks, thereby putting an end to the martial law era. As far as optics went, Ramos and Enrile were the more visible individuals associated with the toppling of the Marcos regime and were among the first official appointees to Cory Aquino's government. Nonetheless, the leadership that Cardinal Sin demonstrated during this critical period in history is irrefutable. This was not lost on the new president. For its part, the CBCP continued its policy of critical collaboration, which was more evident this time in its statements and in its messages. Now, apart from historical agency, as my conclusion, of all the individuals in bringing an end to the martial law era years, the most enduring image of the institutions of the faith during this time is probably the throng of humanity led by nuns, led by the people, led by the religious praying the rosary and carrying the images of the Virgin Mary while confronting heavily armed soldiers and armored vehicles. The success of a non-violent struggle over a dictator's military force less than 3 weeks after a fraudulent election is likened by the Catholic Church media to a miracle in the same breath as the 17th century battles of La Naval de Manila, in which the intercession of the Virgin Mary was credited for enabling an inferior Philippine-Spanish Naval Armada force to repulse the superior Dutch forces. 2 naval ships against 26 naval Dutch ships. But through the prayer of the Rosary, through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary, miraculously, the Philippine-Spanish Armada won. And that is very, very important in the Philippine church history, because if we lost that war, that battle of La Naval, we could have been a Protestant country, because the Dutch Armada is bringing Protestantism to the country. And now we remain to be a Catholic country. Not to be overlooked, however, is the participation of other Christian churches. I call them institutions of faith. We are part of it. We are part of the institutions of faith that made the miracle of Asia possible. Despite their smaller numbers, among the first religious institutions to oppose martial law and were also at the receiving end of atrocities associated with the regime, the NCCP continuously commemorates EDSA People Power Uprising and continues to openly express her opinion as an institution on political issues that threaten the nation's liberties. As for the Catholic Church, under Cardinal Sin's leadership, he sends the approach of liberation at a mass celebrating the 2000th birthday of Mother Mary at Luneta in 1985, and made the critical decision that brought the faithful face to face with forces of the martial law regime. Fittingly, he had Our Lady of EDSA constructed at the very spot where a miraculous event between those two forces supposedly took place. The institutions of the faith in the Philippines were hardly unanimous in dealing with martial law. Differences in circumstances and ideologies led to varying types and levels of engagement that, like the rest of the country, came to a head in February 1986. Nonetheless, again, the essential truth is that ending martial law and ousting Ferdinand Marcos had been accomplished with the agency of institutions of the faith. Is the miracle of Asia real? Yes. How? Through a collective prayer. Just as Father James Reuter would say, a family that prays together stays together, and a world at prayer is a world at peace. So the miracle for me happened because that was a time when the Filipinos were united in prayer, gathered together in prayer, and just as the Lord Jesus would say in the Gospels, your faith has healed you. I am sure that the miracle happened because of the faith of the Filipino people. Thank you very much. Thanks to Jaime Cardinal Sin. Thanks to the Filipino people. Thanks to those who made themselves available. Thanks for those who made themselves involved that the miracle happened just as during the multiplication of the bread. You think the Lord was a magician? There was a miracle because each one of them contributed their bread and the miracle happened. So each of you should contribute your bread. Each of you should participate, get involved so that miracles will again happen in Asia, will again happen in the Philippines, will again happen in the Diocese of Calibo. For truly, miracles happen. God bless us all. May the Our Lady of EDSA pray for us always. Thank you very much for listening and for those who participated. Ma'am Ann, Bishop Cor, Mr. Solidum, I can see you. Thank you from the Aklan Historical Society. Thank you very much for coming. The Santo Niño Seminary, our priest formators from Aklan Catholic College. Thank you very much. Thank you, Calibo Cable, for airing our lecture series entitled The Miracle of Asia, Revisiting EDSA Uno. Thank you very much for airing this talk because you made it more accessible and available to our people. Thank you very much.